Hello and welcome to Carnivorist Chats. My name is James, your host. I started this podcast to help other folks share their own healing stories and to interview thought leaders and experts in the carnivore, keto, and low oxalate space. Before we begin, I'd like to give a shout out to Equip Foods and the Carnivore Bar. As an affiliate, you can use the link in the show notes to get a discount on their products when you check out using the code Carnivorist. Thanks in advance for listening, subscribing, and any likes or shares. And now, on with the podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Carnivorist Chats. It's James, your host. And folks, I know you hear me say this all the time, but I'm super stoked to have today's guests on the podcast. Jake Thomas is a Marine. He's a transformational health coach. He's been vegan. He's been vegetarian. He's been carnivore. He's also experimented with animal-based. He's run marathons being a carnivore, and I'm just pleased to have him on because we were talking about this offline. Jake was one of the first people that reached out to me when I started my Instagram account, The Carnivorist, and just welcomed me to the carnivore space and said, dude, welcome to a new way of life. And he couldn't be more right. So Jake Thomas, welcome to Carnivorist Chats finally, my friend.
Oh, man, it's good to be here, James. Thanks for having me. And I'm sure you're dreading the weather down there in Bermuda, but I'm all smiles here too in Texas.
I tell you what, Jay, well, just a little side note here, man. This hurricane season has been crazy for us. We have had storm after storm, almost like 4 in a row. So I'm just breathing a sigh of relief. There's no storms outside right now. And yeah, it's a tough place to live, right? Wink, wink. It's a really beautiful island for sure. But Jake, as I always do with my podcast, I like to start by just not only just welcoming the guests, thanking them for their impact on me, which I've done with you already, but also getting the guests to just tell a little bit about their own journey. Because for those listeners that may not know you, which is probably rare because, man, your social reach is so great, man. You're putting out such great stuff that we'll get into. But I'd like you to tell the listeners a little bit about your background and how you came to the carnivore way of eating. I mean, it's really great and powerful story that you have.
Yeah, man, thank you. And yeah, I wish you fair seas and calm winds too during the season, for sure, for sure. I grew up in New Orleans, so hurricanes I'm a little familiar with as well. So wishing you fair weather. Man, honestly, it started off as a kid. I played sports all my life. I was always an athlete. I ran track. Soccer was probably my main sport. So putting together the relationship of athletic performance and nutrition came on pretty early for me. Now, in earlier years, that didn't always equate to the most optimal or the most highest of quality in order to say like, hey, I'm running a Mustang or I'm running a BMW or I'm running like a Ferrari. And I didn't make that, you know, connection of like quality of fuel for quality of performance. Whereas now, and I use that analogy a lot and say like, are you a Mustang? Are you a BMW or are you a Ferrari? And if so, nothing wrong with any of those vehicles. But depending on what type of fuel you put into them will tell you what kind of performance you're going to get out of them. And some of those you could definitely damage or like destroy their engines, their internal working components if you do not use the proper fuel grade systems on that. So just kind of a food for thought for the listeners of what kind of vehicle am I? And as I grew older and didn't have youth so much on my side, now I had to kind of rely more on nutrition. And I really started to find that when I was in the military. And having the Marine Corps really promote exercise and fitness, because it wasn't just about a hobby or like, hey, we're doing it for a sport or a passion, but it was like, this is your life. This is someone else's life. You know, can you get over a wall? Can you pull this guy up to meet you kind of thing? Or are you able to carry your own weight, maybe the weight of another? So it became not just about, again, an interest or a hobby or a passion, but it was actually about life. Still, age was on our side, culture and whatnot. We were drinking and we weren't eating the best foods. No, we were still Mustangs, so to speak, and able to throw whatever we wanted in the engine as long as we kept the tires rotated and balanced and the fluids topped off, like the car's going to run pretty well, even though we might have pushed that a little far sometimes, but still. It wasn't until I was later in my 20s, a girl I was dating that kind of got me into my experiments with diets, right? So before I was an athlete, eat this way, pump steel like this, think of myself as a hybrid athlete. I'd swam a good bit. I surfed a little bit. I was able to lift weights. I could run. So I like to be diverse in my abilities. And when I started to make this tie in with nutrition, it wasn't until I was dating a girl, and she mentioned to me like, hey, you should try, almond milk. I was like, why? I've been drinking this milk all my life, blah, 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 blah. And she gave me her reasons. I said, okay, cool. Sure. Let's try it. It also made it more civil around the house. So like, I was fine with that. So that started the first onion layer of like, okay, what about these other things? And what about eating less red meat? And maybe I should try that too. And certainly the American Heart Association would tell me that, as well as the AMA, the American Medical Association, would tell me the same thing about eating lower fat, staying away from red meat, cholesterol, this and that, saturated, unsaturated fat, blah, 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 blah. All the things that I've been told, that you've been told, that most of us have been told all of our lives by our kin, by our parents, by our teachers, certainly by our doctors. So I followed, I'm good at following orders, Marine, all that stuff sometimes. And so I listened to that, and it did me a pretty good fare for a long time. But then I still wasn't feeling great mentally. You know, I was coming out of service and I was drinking a lot. I was using a lot. I had issues with alcohol, issues with substance abuse, issues with just recklessness, eccentric behavior, spending, womanizing, anything you can kind of put your finger on. And I never really tied it to it possibly being an issue with my nutrition. Still, as I dated, I experimented with more diets and found, okay, now I'm dating a vegetarian. I guess I'll try it. Sure. Okay. Now I'm dating, I'm more pescatarian. Sure. I'll try it. Another girl that was from the Middle East and she was more Mediterranean style dieting. Sure. I'll try it. And then I dated a vegan. And, as each one of these phases of my life happened, I was listening to my body more. I was able to get in touch with my body more, able to understand not just my own body, but hers, theirs, so to speak. And in my later years, when I started actually coaching people with personal training and nutrition, I had empathy. I didn't realize it, but I was doing a lot of groundwork to be able to create empathy with clients, as opposed to saying, "Oh, I can't really relate to you as a vegan, James. You've been doing that for a while. I don't know what it's like." No, like I was able to say, "Wow, I did all these things for over a year, some of them for more than years." To be able to reach back and say, "I have tenure there. I've got a little bit of clout, a little bit of again empathy." And then as I started to compete in whether it's hybrid athletics and marathons and fun and bodybuilding, starting to put together, okay, which one of these is the best for me and why? Which one makes me feel better than the other one? Which one's improving my sleep? Which one is reducing my depression or changing my anxiety, my moods? And this is where I really started to form my thesis on the single most effective thing we can do as human beings in regards to our health is controlling what we put into our mouths. And so over the years, and with a lot of debate and polarizing topics and content, of course, I have found that to be animal-based eating, particularly a carnivore diet, right? Where animal fat is the source of energy and nutrient density and just overall optimal form of sustenance. Now, people will debate that and scream and yell and kick and all these things, but that's what I found. It's taken me some pretty cool places. It's gotten me into some amazing circles outside of myself, but also within myself. It's created a business for me. It's created a lifestyle, and it's made me a lot happier than I used to be. It's helped me battle addiction. It's helped me get over addiction. It's helped me get rid of anxieties and depressions. And just the same way, if I want those things to come back into my life, I know what to eat to elicit those responses, which is pretty cool.
Super cool. And Jake, when I was watching a lot of your stuff when I was first starting out on this diet, because men folks we'll find out where to go find Jake after this. I'm sure if you're watching this on YouTube now, you can see his Life Like Jake shirt, but yeah, that's where you can find him for sure. It just resonated with me because you've done all these things. You talk about, you had the experience of being a vegetarian and being a vegan. And we also share the fact that I started out my vegetarian days and slash pescatarian for a time too. I did that because of a significant other, a girlfriend that I was dating way back in the 90s, which was admirable because there wasn't a lot of people out there espousing that way of eating back then. And I stuck with it. And then, of course, the next logical step after being a vegetarian and pescatarian was to try veganism. And I stuck at that dogmatically for a long time, man. And I got very, very sick, as you probably know from seeing my story. But
Yep.
it gives us the experience, Jake. And with your coaching now, I'm sure it's super helpful to be able to, as you say, relate to your clients on that level and say, yeah, I actually tried that for a while. Here's what made the change. Here's what happened to me when I tried this way of eating. So yeah, really great. One thing I wanted to talk about was really quickly is that you did vegan bodybuilding competition and actually ended up winning a couple whilst you were a vegan. I'm super interested to ask you, having done the diet, how did you do it? What were you like eating? It must have been crazy amounts of food, was it?
It was a lot of supplements, that's for sure. Because as you know, like a lot of those things do not exist in the natural world in the ratios that you would want them. Meaning a lean protein source without fat or without carbohydrates doesn't exist in the vegan world. Like something comparable to egg whites, liquid egg whites, or all white meat chicken or all white fish. Doesn't exist in the vegan world. So you have to create those things through supplementation, usually through like a pea protein isolate or some type of plant protein isolate. And it was really about people telling me I couldn't do it, James. Like they're like, there's no way you're going to get the size. You won't be able to compete. You won't look as hard. Your conditioning won't be as good. Da, da, da. I was like, okay, whatever. I saw some people that were doing it, some guys that were doing it, and were having success even in the IFBB enhanced world. And I said, whatever, if these guys can do it, like I should be able to figure this thing out a little bit. And so I did, man. And yeah, sure enough, it was just about applying the same, understandings of macronutrients, the principles of balancing those ratios, and putting together the right nutrition plan and keeping to it throughout a prep. And I did. And yeah, it worked. I won a few competitions, one of which was actually a world championship in 2019, got all the way to the podium. So for people saying like it wasn't doable, it wasn't possible, I was like, oh, I beg to differ. And just the same, contrasting that, on one of my bro diet preps, I actually ate like a ton of Popeyes throughout the prep to show people like, and if it fits your macros, whole strategy can still work. And yeah, it did. And they're like, well, how'd you do it? I was like, well, get the strips blackened instead of fried. You avoid the things that are going to have heavier oils and heavier unnecessary fats and carbs, like anything breaded or otherwise. So it's a lot of the dirty rice, your mashed potatoes, don't eat the biscuits, not sweet teas, stay away, from the certain sauces. But I was able to show people how to do that. And like, I won a couple of competitions doing that too. So would I say that they're the best or most optimal or healthiest ways to go about doing that? Absolutely not. Right. And that's where I kind of got into this whole realm of like, okay, now we're talking about not just for performance, but actual qualitative data of what is, I don't know, better is the right word because it's kind of subjective, but technically, optimally better is what I found.
I want to talk really quickly, Jake, about something that resonated with me early on. And I believe it was your dad, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that said, if you can't kill it, pull it, pick it, don't eat it.
That was a good friend of mine that said that. And I was like, man, that's really good. I'm going to have to steal that from you. And he was actually the same friend who got me into the carnivore space in the first place. We served together in the Marine Corps, one of my best friends in the world, a guy that I love to death, respect, and will always have with me. Mentioned to me in this is June 2020 or May 2020. He was like, "Hey man, have you heard about this carnivore diet thing?" And da da da. I really hadn't, to be honest, but I just finished my last competition the year before, and it was the World Championship. And so I'm thinking like, I still have the medal around my neck, so to speak. And here's a friend of mine that's definitely not healthy. He's been dealing with his own problems himself, his physical health, his mental health, all issues going on, that to come to me and say, hey, man, you should try. I was like, are you talking to me? Like the one with the trophies and the medal? So it was this funny little ego moment there that I had to get past. But him saying, no, man, check out this podcast, check out these videos, read up on this literature, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yeah, so it's like a keto diet, and he says, no vegetables, no fruits, nothing other than an animal. And I'm like, so it's like a keto diet. And we kept going back and forth. And finally I was like, okay, man, I'll bite. You're very passionate about it. And this is to anybody. If you have a subject matter that you're ready to defend, talk about, or otherwise stand for, if you can present data, legitimate things and substantive information about that, like present an argument, like I'll listen to it. I don't care how much I disagree with it or think it's nonsense. If you can actually show something to kind of back up your support or support yourself with, like I'm down to listen. And he did that really well. So I said, okay, fine. So I started reading, started watching, started listening, and that's how I got into the carnivore space. But it was because of that pick it, pull it, or kill it little soliloquy that sparked the whole thing. Yeah.
Jake, let me ask you a personal question at this time. When you started getting into the carnivore diet, was the substance abuse still part at that time when you started the carnivore diet? Or is this long gone? When sort of did that end for you?
Yeah, it was gone by this point, luckily. I say gone, it's never totally gone. It's always back there somewhere. More so like you just look down at it and be like, yeah, we used to be friends, but you're not so powerful over me anymore. But there's always these like recurring ghosts, maybe, or these, feelings of darkness. And like even still to this day, I'm fascinated by drugs. I'm fascinated by the behavior. I'm fascinated by what I would think was cool about that, the whole aura, the kind of rock and roll sense of appeal that I would get when I would be in those moments. Like it was the allure more than the actual feelings that really enticed me. And so I've found that over time, those feelings of enticement and the drawing kind of sense of the grip is heightened through impurity for me. Impurity could be alcohol, impurity could be cigarettes, impurity could be the wrong environment, impurity could be the wrong food. Literally, the more that I would lean in towards impurities, the greater chance I had of succumbing to that grip, just like a gateway drug would be. Like for me now, it's like, I haven't drank in like 20 months now. And that's been a huge thing, just to totally be rid of alcohol. Because for me, I'm like, this is not even a reason for me to have it. There's no point. It's doing nothing but hindering my feelings of good. It's nothing. It's definitely hindering performance. So for me to even entertain that is like a waste of time. And so to stay away from these gateway things, and food is at the top of that list, man. So like if you want to feel, Jake, you want to feel worse, you want to feel more depressed, eat a bunch of that bullshit. Eat a bunch of that junk food. It might not feel bad right now, but you're going to wake up tomorrow and not want to get out of bed. You're going to wake up tomorrow and try to pull the sheets over your eyes. You're going to wake up tomorrow and snooze that 4 o'clock alarm. You're going to wake up tomorrow and not want to go do XYZ over some food, James. Not because I went on a coke bender for 4 days and slept with a bunch of girls and stole some money and did all like, yeah, you don't want to wake up from that for sure. But with all the poison that you definitely put into your body, it would make sense. As opposed to, you mean to tell me that like a couple of bowls of cereal and like some crappy cheap pancakes and a frosty made me feel that way the next day? Yeah. And that's what I started to find out, because when I cut all that out, when I cut out all the processed food, all the other than animal foods, all the grains, all the greens, it wasn't until I stripped myself down all the way, caffeine, everything, to a strict carnivore diet and started to realize, like, oh my God, man, you don't think about it because you're so seasoned to it. You've built up such a tolerance, the same way as you do with booze. Like when we stop drinking, we're like, hey, wow, I'm such a lightweight now, like one drink and I'm flying. Okay, I'm such a lightweight now, one donut and I'm dying. Again, maybe not in the moment, but tomorrow I'm going to be like, dude, what did I do yesterday? Oh, that was horrible. All those Lucky Charms I ate last night, such a mistake, even though I was there with my brother and his wife and their baby girl, my goddaughter, and I just wanted to bond with her in the moment. And then I wake up feeling like shit. That's what I started to put together.
It's so true, Jake. And thank you for sharing. You said in an interview that the physical benefits were indirect. It was the mental benefits of carnivore that really surprised you. And I have to tell you, it's the same for me, man. And my 30s and early 40s, I had a decade plus of a very, very stressful life. I won't get into details now, but suffice to say, I made a lot of bad dietary choices. I was eating trash vegetarian and then for a long time, which was a lot of junk and a lot of booze, man. I actually was in the industry for a while. I was a wine sales rep. So, that was all day tasting. And then the evenings when we knocked off, it was drinking more. And it wasn't until I started the carnivore diet and after being so sick, I was metabolically unhealthy for sure, not only nutrient deficient on the vegan diet, but also I had been drinking for so many years and ruined my liver probably. And as you say, when you capture this feeling, you don't want to let it go. And I think so many folks like yourself and myself that I can admit to that I definitely know that I had a drinking problem. And I don't, when you feel this good, you don't want to go back to the way you felt. Yes, we're human and yes, we can slip up, but we know the way now to the proverbial promised land, don't we?
Yep, 100%. And that's why I defended viciously. And I encourage, implore, maybe is the better word, my clients, my friends, anyone else that's touched this or that's gotten themselves into this in a good way, to be like, look, it's up to you to protect it. The same way as you would protect a womb of a child that's yours, that you're carrying, or that you've spawned, or it's the same thing. It has to be that same severity, because everywhere else out there is a minefield of temptation and destruction. And it's not that these things are created maliciously to do that. Maybe some of them, but that's the fact. To think like, God, is it really that bad? Yes, it's really that bad. Is the government really that involved in trying to squander and slander data and reporting of statistics and medical information and inverse correlations and not show positive relationships? Yes. Are big pharma doing this and paying these people to lobby for them? Yes. Am I a conspiracy theorist? No. But these are the facts. Like, tell me why our country, the United States, I say right? Our country, the United States, why, with all of our resources, money, human power, et cetera, that we've had and shown progress over the last 20, 30, 50 years, yet the relationship of health is towards the opposite. That doesn't make sense. Like, it literally does not make sense. Like, how can we have all these means, all these technologies, yet our people, and especially our children, are getting sicker? They're dying slower, or rather dying faster. They're living longer, but what's the quality of life for most Americans after 55? I'd love to see that statistic. Oh, sure, our age or lifespan went up 3 years to 78 and a half, but like, what do most Americans look like from 55 on? Go take a walk through an airport and you'll find out. Seriously, it's abysmal. And so where do we think that cause is? Is it because we're all going to some place every day and get hit in the head with a hammer and it's, retarding us, so to speak, sending us back into some type of deficited form of consciousness and physicality? Yes, but we're not doing it with a hammer. We're not doing it at a doctor's office or some type of clinic. We're doing it at grocery stores. We're doing it at our restaurants. We're doing it at our bars. We're doing it at our homes, by how we don't eat, how we don't live, how we don't move. It's all self-induced, mainly and most importantly because as human beings, and especially as westernized human beings, we are much more valuable. Sick, scared, and stupid, because a healthy, strong, and informed person doesn't have the value as one that is sick, scared, and stupid. You're a commodity, James, just like I am. Our information, our data, that is the largest and most valuable monetary source on the planet now. It's not gold. It's not a precious ore or metal. It's us. And so by that, like, we need to keep these things us, sick, scared, and stupid, so that they pay for this, they subscribe to that, and they stay away from pop, 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 pop.
100% agree, Jake. And I just got back from vacation and traveling, and you're absolutely right. And just looking around the airport, and I've heard you say, like you, when the good old service trolley comes through on the airplane, no thank you, no thank you. Are you sure you
Are
don't
you
want anything?
sure?
Yeah, here you go. Here's the cookies, pretzels, chips. No, I don't want anything. I'm good. Coke, soda, nope, thank you. And my eyes have been opened in so many ways since I began this way of eating, and you've just eloquently summed up the reasons why my eyes have been opened and what we should have our eyes being open to. What I'd like to do now is sort of segue back into your journey and tell the listeners about that transition from switching over to the carnivore diet and your experience as you went through the change and what you noticed right away, if you wouldn't mind.
Oh, for sure. Well, at first it was a honeymoon. The first week was just, oh my God, I'm eating so much fat. This is awesome, because for the years preceding that, I'd been a low fat, high carb, high protein bodybuilding competitor slash fitness model in New York. So I'm always tiptoeing through the tulips of like what I'm eating, counting calories, making sure that I'm photo ready at a moment's notice. Because when you work in that world, it's like, hey, Jake, you got an audition, blah, 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 tomorrow. Perfect. I'm ready. You can't be, I need 2 weeks or a month. Or it's like you're literally on all the time. It's like, hey, can you be at this place in 2 hours? They just had a dropout or something like that. You would kill it in this audition. Yeah, sure, I'm ready to go. Like, to be like that is awesome. There's a great confidence in that. Don't get me wrong. You look good. It's cool. But your life is based around that and maintaining that physique and that conditioning, or that level of conditioning. So at the time for me, it was all low fat, high carb, and high protein, right? So like really low fat, like less than 50 grams of fat per day for years. And then, that first week of doing this carnivore, and I'm just like, oh my God, I can eat as much as I want. And like fat included. I was ravenous, dude. Ravenous, because my body was just like, please, we've been dying without this. We haven't had this for so long. Like, give us more, give us more. So like literally ravenous. And I had to keep checking in with my friend, the guy who put me on it. And it's like, dude, are you sure about this? Because bodybuilder, fitness model, nutritionist, all that in the back of my mind is like, this is too much. Our macros are getting thrown off. Count the calories, blah, blah, blah. So that was the real hurdle for me the first week, was just trying to dispel the voice that was in my head trying to tell me not to do it. Whereas my body is telling me, dude, keep it coming, keep it coming, keep it coming. But my mind, my emotional, reactive mind, is the one going, no, no. Why? Our bodies, James, are the most perfect, unbiased, objective communicators in the world. Meaning, hey, James, it's hot outside. How do I know? Or how do you know, James? Because we're gonna secrete some sweat in case it's not getting through to you. Like, hey, buddy, we're hot. Here's some sweat, so you can see that. If you don't cool us off, we're eventually gonna get heat exhaustion, then heat stroke, and then we'll die. Okay, just letting you know. So here's a little sweat. You pay attention. You drink some water. You get in the shade. You cool off. Oh, thank you, James. We appreciate it. Heart rate goes back down. The body re-regulates. Same thing in the cold. Hey, James, it's a little cold. We're gonna send some shivers. Here's some goosebumps. If you don't do something about this, we're going to get hypothermic, maybe a little frostbite, and then death. You don't listen to it. You start losing toes, and eventually you die because you froze to death. Well, the body told you that. Every other time in the world, we try to argue with, or rather, many other places, we try to argue with our bodies, with our minds, with our emotional and reactive minds. Every time I drink red wine, I get a headache. My aunt, like 5, 6 years ago, my uncle from the other room. Well, then you shouldn't drink red wine. And we all, ha ha ha, it's pretty funny. But like, I've never forgotten that moment. How true is that? Oh my God, I love pizza, but it gives me the worst gas. But I love pizza. Your emotional reactive mind loves pizza. Your body hates it. How many, whatever you want to insert into that example, that we just blow past that third base coach throwing up the stop sign and round home to say, like, no, but I really like it. I really like it. No, you want to, you think you do. You have this emotional connection to it, but your body does not like it. So in that first week, that was my hurdle, was like, oh my God, my body is just loving this, but my mind is hating it because I've got experience. I have credentials. I have all this notoriety and clout in this industry, and I'm the expert. Fat is bad, and blah, blah, blah. But my body is telling me it's great. What the heck? So that was week one. Week two is where I hit a real keto flu, which I've experimented with before, but not on this level because I was still taking some type of carbohydrate or some form of, other than animal substance. But this time, when I did my first 30 days of carnivore, I went strict carnivore, no caffeine, nothing other than animals, zero. Some people would say that's like varsity style. Like, yeah, I would say it's varsity style because some people will still drink coffee, some people will still use pepper. I had salt, no coffee, just animals and animal proteins or animal byproducts, nothing else. No yogurts or any of the fun stuff. And so the withdrawal from that was substantial. And I had written in my book talking about how from day 11 to day 14, man, I really wanted to quit. I was so depressed. I was angry. I was irritable. I was restless. I wanted to sleep, but at the same time, I didn't want to wake up. I don't want to say I got suicidal, but I was like, dude, this is really, really not fun. It was also June of 2020. So it was an interesting time in the world. Add on top of that how I was feeling. But seriously, the withdrawal to me of all that was as strong, if not worse, than any withdrawal I've ever had from drugs or alcohol. I couldn't believe it. So when I talk to people now or try to coach them through this, I say, look, without scaring you off, like this might be the hardest thing you've ever had to go through. Yeah, right, dude. Like just changing my diet. I'm like, I'm just saying, I know who you are. I know where you come from. I know what your background is. I know how you currently eat and live. This might be the hardest thing you've ever had to go through. Yeah, right. And then you find out, and that's what it takes. It took that happening to me for me to understand, like, my God, this is how strong that poison really is. Because I'm not allergic to these things. I'm allergic to poison. I'm not allergic to these naturally occurring elements in foods. I'm allergic to poison. And it's the same thing with other people. You just don't realize it because of how ridden we are by the weight of it all. How much our tolerance has just been built up since we were kids. Because we start, as soon as we get off the teeth, we're having processed food. So you're talking about decades worth of consuming all that stuff, and it's just built up toxicity and sludge and tolerance. And in this 2 week period, you mean to tell me I was able to tap into that and start cracking that mold? That's how powerful this is. And so, yeah, those first 2 weeks were enlightening beyond. And then the 2 weeks that followed that was like, man, this is cruise control. And then I was coming up on day 30 and I was like, all right, what am I going to have as my celebratory meal to break this with? I'm going to go with my classic, blueberry and banana pancakes, French toast with cereal on top, blah, blah, blah. So like, which is funny because here I am cleaning my body out, basically purifying it to a level that it hasn't been at arguably since I was a child. And the first thing I want to do is revert it back to where it was by consuming with what I was. And I make all this food on day 30 and I'm like looking at the pancakes. I'm like, oh my God, this looks so good. And I go to take this first bite and man, it didn't bring it home. And I was like, this is weird. I mean, they couldn't have looked better, more picturesque, more photogenic. But the memory, the mouthfeel, the sensation, like all that wasn't there. So I was like, let me take another bite. Nope. Take another bite. Okay, this isn't working. Let me try to make French toast. That didn't do it either. Man, I just want some bacon and eggs. And that hit the spot. Now, I eventually was able to crack that. You just push at it a little, you keep going at it, the poison will eventually win. But nonetheless, like my body was telling me, and my mind was trying to argue it because one of the most difficult things we deal with as human beings is trying to convince our minds of something that our hearts know to be a lie. So that was the first thing I learned, my first eureka with this diet. Who would have thought that just by eating or not eating a bunch of different foods that it could happen?
Man, you beat me to it. That was one of my favorite quotes from you, Jake. Seriously, that is a great one, man. And the other one that you often say is, feeling becomes understanding. And we are just talking about that, right? I just recall I was so similar to you. I was nutritionally starved for fat. I ate whole foods, plant-based. I ate very clean as a vegan. However,
Mm,
now understanding, I bombed myself with the highest oxalate foods there were. I was juicing smoothies with spinach and chia seeds and turmeric, and
yep.
I really wrecked my gut. So that was causing, you know, gut health leads to mental health. If you have ill gut health, as we know, all connected, Hippocrates and all that. And so you live and learn, and feeling becomes understanding. But yeah, I had the honeymoon for a couple of months maybe because I couldn't get enough in my mouth. I mean, the hardest thing for me, as you said, yours was wrapping your mind around just eating meat. Mine was, ironically, coming from a vegan background, was not the meat on the plate. It was taking away the vegetables for me. That was the hardest part. It was the subtraction, not the addition, which was weird. Yeah, I mean, just crazy. And so the mental clarity obviously came for you, that we all get that feeling like boom, like superhuman, like processing speed again, I'm sure, for you. But let's get into a little bit about the physical benefits that you noticed as well, Jake. You ran a couple of marathons, which shocked the crap out of people, because you're running a marathon, I think one of them at least, fasted and then purely carnivorous diet. How did that go, man? I know one was in Philly, so
Yep. Kind of just by default, or rather building up to that, I should say. I was playing with runs. Like, a lot of times not a lot of times, I've been fasting already for years, even before getting on the carnivore diet. But then when I started to really put together like mixing ketosis with fasted state workouts, like this could really be something big here. And I just got tired of like supplements. I got tired of thinking, okay, I need to take this pre-workout, this intra workout, this post-workout. I was like, this doesn't sound right. Like the origins of the Olympiad, like they didn't have all that. You know, there are still records, Olympic records, still standing in certain events that have been there for 100 years. You mean to tell me, like, with all of our means and technology and information, somebody can't run faster than that today? That somebody can't swim faster than that or perform, whatever it is, faster? So I started looking at that and I was like, yeah, no. And that was another kind of tie in through the vegan world, was like the amount of stuff I had on the shelf to have to get me there, the powders, the tinctures, the liquids, the pills, like to create all that. I was like, this is BS. And so I just started eating meat. And when I really started just going heavy on steak and eggs, I was like, dude, look, I mean, I'm freaking pumping diesel here, looking like Vince Gironda, like the man, the guy who really wrote the book as far as in steak and eggs bodybuilding back in the 60s. And looking at that guy, just thinking like, all right, steak and eggs. Okay, let's see what happens. And the more I did it, the better I was running, the less pain I was having, the soreness was going away, my recovery time seeming to increase. My urine was always a great source of clarity of system fuel. I'm clear, I'm clean, I'm not peeing, highlighter fluid like it would look like after sometimes taking some of these pre-workouts or whatever, and I'm not consuming all these other dyes and colors and additives, diluents, adulterants, chemicals that are just not made for human consumption. That yet here we are just sucking them down like it's cool. Um, my bowel movements changed completely, less frequent, as infrequent as I think 11 days is the most I ever went. And people are like, oh my God, dude, what is wrong? I'm like, because I'm absorbing all of it, as opposed to being as a vegan, I'm going 4 or 5 times a day sometimes. And I'm thinking thinking, oh, it's because I'm super healthy and my metabolism is really fast. No, dude, it's because you're consuming all this stuff, this huge plate, mass of leafage and vegetation, blah, blah, blah. And all we need is that. The rest of it is discard. Whereas now we are literally consuming the building blocks of proteins, fats, amino acids, and you know, a limited amount of carbohydrates, which is basically null. So all these were like things that I was seeing on the board of like, okay. And then I just kept running, I kept swimming, I kept working out this way. And then as the races would come up, I'd be like, hey, I just did that 5K without drinking any water. During the race, before the race, I didn't eat any food. Oh, cool. Let me try this 10K. I did the 10K. I did a half marathon, and I finished this half marathon in New Orleans at like a 6:55 pace, and finished the race. And I was like, man, I feel really good. I think I could do this double the distance. Why not? Let's try it. I didn't drink any water on this one. When's the next marathon? So I ran this half. This is in 2021. It was on Halloween in New Orleans, and we love dressing up in New Orleans. So like I got to wear a costume for the race. It was awesome. Took my mother to the Saints game. The Saints played that day. We beat Tom Brady in the Superdome. It was great. And I'm thinking, all right, when's the next marathon? I'm signing up for it. The next closest one to me, I was living in New York at the time, was in Philly. This was October 31st. The Philly Marathon was November 21st. So I had 21 days to prep for it, right? I'd never run a marathon. The furthest I'd ever run was like 17 miles. So I was like, whatever, I'll be fine. I'll use the same logic. I'll use the same pace. I'll do the best I can for 20 days, crash prep course. So like put it together. But I was like, I have the secret weapon. I know what I can draw energy from and how I can get it better than these people with their gels and all their other stuff. Like, I'll be fine. And I was like, all right, by this pace, I'd love to run under 3 hours, but like, let's crazy, not stupid is what I say. So I was like, let's go for sub 3:30, 3.5 hours. And even to that, people are like, dude, your first marathon, like just worry about completing it. Like maybe 4 hours, to be conservative. I'm like, fuck conservative. Like I'm here to run the thing. I'm not here just to finish. So I was like, 3:30 is the number. And sure enough, I prepped before it. I made my own like race gels out of raw cream, liquefied bone marrow, and some homemade electrolyte mix that I'd made together. And I'd stuffed them in little Ziploc bags. And I was like, in case I need these, this is what I'll have and I'll use. Right. If I start to really die and I need to say, all right, I'm not going to do it dry fasted, I'll break that. But mile after mile, no water, no water, no water. And I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. Now, around mile 17, mile 18, it definitely started to kick in and it was hurting. It was painful. I slowed down a lot. I was on a really good pace. I was probably going to run like 3:10 and then just my pace tanked around 18 and I had to gut through it. But I was like, I'm not drinking water. I'm not drinking water. I'm going to do it now. I got this far. And sure enough, I finished with no water. So I ran it fasted. I ran it dry fasted also and ran 3:26 for that. And people were like, why would you do that? That's so stupid. I'm like, just proving a point, man. I felt a certain way. I saw all these other people with all their gear and all their things. And I was like, I might as well come out here barefoot and with nothing and do that. That's kind of what I did.
That's incredible, man. And we were talking offline earlier, and this is a good point to interject. You just did your first triathlon. Please tell the listeners about that. That is so awesome. And I can relate. Again, we go back to what you said earlier, having gone through. I used to do triathlons in my high school days, way back when, but they are different beasts. So please tell the listeners.
Yeah, they are. And I got served some humble pie. But I don't know what it is about these races that I find so late or so, that they're like, oh, it's next week or it's later this month. I need to plan these out better. First off, let me make that disclaimer to everybody. It's not the smartest way to do it. Like, do it right, have fun, and do it proper. So a week ago, I find out about the triathlon here in Kerrville. A week ago, and I was like, oh man, it's like right in my backyard. I'm like thinking about the route. The swim has to be where I swim in the Guadalupe River. The bike route has to be where I usually ride, which is through town on certain streets. And the run is probably where I usually run, which is a trailhead around a certain park. And I'm like, I look at the map, I'm like, dude, this is my route. This is where I swim. This is where I ride. This is where I run. This is literally the backyard of my condo. Like my condo balcony, you could see the starting line of the whole race, the setup, the swim, checkpoints, everything. I was like, I got to do this, man. So that was a week ago, which meant the race was in 5 days. I hadn't swam since August 19th, which is when I was in New York for the NYC SEAL swim. Also did that fastest 3.5 miles in the Hudson. And I was like, whatever, we'll be fine. It's only 500 meters. It was a sprint try, right? So anybody that doesn't know, for a triathlon, a sprint triathlon is a 500-meter swim, a 14-mile bike ride, and a 5K run. And I was like, dude, we got this easy. Like, this will be a Saturday workout. This will be fun. Now, my bike is not a tri bike. I have a single speed road bike, single speed, no gears. Okay. I do not have cleats or clip pedals, and I usually ride my bike in flip flops. So I was like, I'm not going to change that. So I'm going to ride my single speed bike in flip flops too. So is that something you should necessarily do? Probably not. But I was like, this will just add to the fun of it because I was literally just there to have fun and have a good Saturday workout. So the swim was tough for me, really tough because, like I said, I hadn't been swimming in a month, and like it definitely showed. But still, I got through it. As soon as I got on the bike, I was like, all right, time to make up some time here. And I started flying, and I averaged 20 miles an hour for the 14 miles, again, in a single speed bike and flip flops, and was passing guys like just overtaking, just eating them up. And they're all on like, Carnivoristas and servo bikes and specialized this and that with the aero bars and aero tires. And I'm just like flying by these dudes and then get on the run. And I was great. I kicked off my flip flops, took the mud off my feet because they were all dirty, and started running. I was like, oh my God, I'm like really running fast because my legs were churning so much. And I didn't realize I'd be running that quick. And I kept like a 7:25 pace for the run, and finished it again. No water, no food, no nothing. I had a blast, and it was awesome. I felt awesome. And while I was on the run, and I told you this before the show, I was turning at the halfway mark and was passing this group of guys, like five or six of them. And I heard one of the guys go, "Hey man, that's the guy that was on the single speed bike and flip flops." And I was like, all right, I guess the word got around. And then another guy came up to me after the award ceremony and was like, he's like, "Hey man," like he tapped me on my shoulder. And I was like, "Whoa, like what?" And he's like, "Dude, big dude." He's like pointing down at me. He's like, "I just got to tell you, man, you took my soul when you passed me on that single speed bike and flip flops." I was like, "Sorry?" Like, I was like, he's a big guy. I was like, "Man, I'm sorry. I hope you had a good time." He goes, "That was nuts." And I was like, "Cool."
Well done, man. That's a great story and great thing again to add to the experience belt that
But
you
dude,
have,
now
man.
now I got the try bug, man. And like before the call, I was on the phone with the company building my bike, my try bike, and a girlfriend of mine was like, "What is with you?" And like the most expensive hobbies in the world, the most expensive. She's like, "You're into diving, you're learning to be a pilot. Now you triathlon." She's like, "You really don't pick cheap stuff." And I was like, I guess not, but that's not the reason. But yeah, building that bike now is the first thing I'm going to do because it's like if I could do that with the gear that I had, like man, you give me the real equipment, like I'm going to tear this thing up. And to do it our way, it's like yeah, I'm going to start making statements, man. So keep an eye out on the USA Tri schedule because I'll be there.
Oh man, I will for sure. And then, hey, I'm just putting it out there. Bermuda has a world triathlon event every year now. You saw our first ever gold medal in the Olympics was won, the most recent one by a female, Flora Duffy, who's well known. So we have a huge triathlon presence here.
Okay,
Yeah.
amazing, dude. I'm down.
Jake, before I let you go, there's a couple of more sections I wanna just touch on before we get into the life like Jake and the coaching and how folks can find you. But you describe, and it's funny how things come in threes. You describe the three rings of the way of eating: animal base, carnivore, and the lion diet. But tied into that, there are three rings of health almost that you discuss, and that is detoxification, nutrition, and exercise. Just give the listeners a little bit of insight into how you look at those and what your view is on those three things, those six things, really.
Yeah. So for the diets, I see them as concentric circles, so one within the other. And if you're thinking about trying one of these diets, or you're thinking about like experiment with a carnivore diet, like okay, great. You don't have to delve right into the tightest of those circles. You can start with one that is maybe the most all-encompassing, which I would consider an animal-based diet, meaning the majority of your calories, the denominator of your caloric consumption, comes from animals or animal byproducts. Simple. The numerator is whatever else you want it to be: vegetables, fruits, grains, even if you want to. I'm not going to encourage you to eat those things, but basically meaning the majority of your calories comes from animals and animal byproducts. Now, for a lot of people, it's really what they're kind of doing already. If you're a heavy protein eater, if you're a heavy meat eater, you're probably already doing that. So before you start thinking, I could never do that, it's like with fasting, like, oh, I can never do that. You get 8 hours pretty much for free in the bank when you sleep. So people that think like, I don't know how I could do it's like many people are already doing this, James, which is pretty interesting. Then I would maybe just tinker with it and say, like, all right, if you want to refine that a little bit in your numerator, maybe remove the grains, maybe remove the greens, making sure you're not eating processed foods. If you really want to get the most optimal and efficient use of that animal-based diet. So for me, the way I would do it would be denominator, majority of calories being animals and animal byproducts, numerator, fruits, I don't even know, maybe sweet potatoes and honey syrup would probably be about it for me in my version of an animal-based diet. Within that, the next circle would be the carnivore diet. So now you're talking about removing anything other than an animal. So animals and animal byproducts only. Well, Jake, what about coffee? Well, does coffee walk, fly, breathe, or swim? No. So it's a plant. So I would put coffee in animal based. What about pepper or garlic or seasoning? Well, those are plants. I would put them in animal based. Salt. What about salt? Well, guess what? Animals carry salt naturally in them, and salt is a naturally occurring element. So, like, I put it in the carnivore diet, and that would be the one within, again, the animal based, then into the carnivore. So, animals and animal byproducts only. And other people will say, well, I drink coffee on my carnivore diet. You can do you. You can call it whatever you want. I don't have copyright or trademark on any of these. These are just the way I call them. The same way if you were to go order a Neapolitan pizza from a traditional Neapolitan chef in Naples, and you said, can I get a margarita pizza with pineapple on it? He would say, I'll serve you a pizza with basil, mozzarella, tomato sauce, and pineapple. But it's not a margarita pizza anymore. So someone asked me, can I have coffee on the carnivore diet? You can have coffee on that diet, but it's no longer the carnivore diet. That's how I would answer that. I would say that's an animal based diet. So now within the two of those circles, animal based, carnivore would be your lion diet, or the most, I don't want to call it strict, but let's say with the least amount of variables. So you've got red meat coming from ruminant animals only, your hooved polygastric animals, cow, bison, sheep, goats, and salt and water, right? Well, why is it called the lion diet? Well, to quote Michaela Peterson, because calling it the red meat, salt, and water diet wouldn't sound nearly as cool or as marketable. So lion is a little bit better. And second follow-up question most people have is like, well, lions don't eat salt. Where do they get salt from? They get it from the animals that they consume through their blood mostly. So it actually does work pretty well. So carnivore, or rather animal-based diet, carnivore diet, lion diet. And then as far as in detoxification, nutrition, and exercise, that's my order of priority in regards to our health. As important as I say, the single most effective thing we can do in regards to our health is controlling what we put into our mouths. People automatically assume that to be consumption. What about if it's omission? Controlling what we put into our mouths. What if that means about what we don't put into our mouths, about what we don't put into our eyes, into our ears? Because is it so much the carnivore diet that is doing for you? Is it so much the diet itself that is giving you the benefits? I tell you what, it's not. It's all the other stuff that's not coming in that is far outweighing the consumption factor. Now, is the consumption factor also important? Absolutely. Why? Because now we're talking about the least amount of variables yielding the maximum amount of benefits, meaning from a single source, you're able to extract, utilize, and benefit all these micronutrients, macronutrients, amino acid profiles, digestive enzymes, etc., without duressing and stressing your body. This is what I relate to as breast milk a lot of times, in the sense that an infant, when they're on breast milk, why does breast milk exist? Because it's a miracle of mammalian evolution to give our babies everything they need from a single source of sustenance with the most amount of utilization, the highest amount of bioavailability, with the least amount of discard, and with the least amount of stress on their bodies as possible. That's the most important thing. Why? Because they're fragile, they're developing. We don't want to stress their bodies. So how do we do that as adults? How do we do that as grown people? What single source of sustenance could we use in that sense? And it's definitely red meat. Nothing else in the world has the nutrient density profiles as does, gram for gram, pound per pound, part per million of red meat. And somebody tried to say something about leafy greens the other day about that. And I was like, Man, this is not a debate. I'm sorry. Like I'm not sorry, but this isn't a debate. It's science. So detoxification, as important as it is, and as important as the diet is, it's really because of the removal and the omission of all those other things. At the same time, having the strongest, most powerful, most potent form of sustenance, optimal, single source, minimal variable sustenance that you can get in cooperation with that omission. Now you're talking about why you feel the way you do, why the benefits are so strong, because you're so clean and you're receiving this maximum dose of energy, of pure, clean, great energy, to where your body's going, oh my God, this is incredible. It's like, yeah, because it is incredible, because everything else has been a deficit, has been a shadow of what your potential really is. And then you couple that with some exercise and some good old fashioned movement, it is seemingly superhuman. But guess what? It's not. That's human. That's a human being. It's just that everybody else, the rest of us, as we used to be, we're performing as, like I said, a shadow version of ourselves because of what we were consuming, what we were not consuming, what we thought to be healthy. Yeah, you're great, but you're only at like 40%. No way. I'm like, I'm an Iron Man. Cool. You're at like 40%. And I, again, learned that this past weekend amidst all those other seasoned vets and pros, people that are half my age, with the gear that they had, and yet I can show up on 5 days notice and flip flops and a single speed bike and do that. I don't know, man.
This is going to tie in nicely to the final section of my questions for you, Jake. But we talked about it this whole episode. Through experimentation on yourself, you found a way out. And through that way out, you created this life like Jake. And talk to us about that, Jake. What spurred that on for you? What was the creative thought process behind life like Jake, besides the fact that it rolls off the tongue really easily, man? It's a great catchy thing, man.
You took the words out of my mouth, because that's literally what I usually say first when people ask me, like, well, it's because it's 3 words. They're commonly used, open domain, and it's easy SEO, and it rolls off the tongue. It's literally what I usually say. So can't say that now.
Sorry, man. Sorry about that. But and I'll interrupt you for 1 sec. Is the other thing is that you often talk about is really important is it's more life like you, and I'll let you describe what that means.
Totally. So, yeah, it really started with when I started to share a lot of my life on social media, like during the advent of Facebook, when it was, if you were one of the cool kids with the Facebook.com account. Um, and just not wanting to show people things that I was doing because I was bragging, but I wanted to show them what I was doing, where I was going, what I was eating, who I was with, because of how it made me feel, and in hopes that it would make them feel the same way, or maybe somehow encourage them to go out there to experience that for the same benefits that I was getting. And that really pushed with food. And that's how I kind of got into like working with certain companies to like advertise products, because I was like, God, this stuff's so good. I feel so good from it, blah, 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 blah. And that spurred into workouts and just sharing what I was doing, sharing my life. And as I was doing that, this is also where I was finding my own healing, right? How I was still dealing with depression. I was still dealing with inferiority complexes, still dealing with substance abuse, still dealing with just childhood emotional trauma and separation anxiety, things that I didn't want to talk about, but I was able to kind of test and theorize in my own life of what was working for me, what was not. Okay, I thought alcohol was working. It's not. I thought sleeping around a bunch was working. It's not. I thought, wasting my money on these things and expensive, it's not. But when I started to do this small little list of things, reading, writing, meditating, stretching, exercise, habitually, religiously, I found a new sense of wholesomeness, a new sense of completeness about myself that I hadn't had in a long, long, long time, to be honest, since I was really in the Marine Corp, where I had this identity, this confirmed sense of character, purpose, right? And so when I got out and kind of lost that, I was trying to fill that hole with all these things, thinking I need to consume, and I needed to go there, and I need to be with her, and I need to wear these clothes and have this job and fancy high rise apartment in New York, blah, 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 blah. But I was still not whole. Like I was still empty. And then slowly I started to read this book and these books, and oh my God, I'm meditating now. Well, who am I? What is going on here? Blah, blah, blah. Oh my God, I'm going on walks without headphones. I'm going on runs without. Thinking about presence and all these cliche words like manifestation and mindfulness. Well, who am I? And it started to work. And then I started to say, oh my God, I'm sleeping better. Oh my God, I'm not waking up wanting to kill myself. Oh my God, I'm not waking up wanting to kill other people. Oh my God, I'm not waking up not wanting to wake up. What changed? I wasn't eating this. I wasn't going there. I wasn't thinking this way. I wasn't talking out loud. I wasn't It was this system that I'd been putting together over years. And throughout that time, as people that knew me kind of started to see this happening, dude, you seem a lot different. You seem a lot happier. What's going on, man? Well, and I would kind of tell them little bits here and there, close friends, family friends, acquaintances, distant, people that I'd met through travels over the years. And I started to build this methodology with them. I started to dose it on them. Like, okay, if this worked for me, maybe this will work for her. Maybe a little sprinkle of this will work is what he needs. Okay, let me try a little bit of that with her. And sure enough, like, oh my God, man. And to all my friends and family over the years, like, hey, guess what? You're all guinea pigs. And that's how I really built it all, was testing everything that worked on myself to make sure it would work with other people, which I believed and knew in my heart that it would. And it did, because we all seek and want the same thing. We all want to be happy. We all want to be loved. We all want to be thought of, considered for, remembered. And I believe in the inherent goodness of humanity. In spite of what people think, in spite of what people say, or maybe sometimes want to believe, it's like, I love the story of Peter Pan. It's like, everybody knows how to fly. And a lot of us have forgotten how because we've relinquished our happy thoughts or refused to want to believe in that. And it's like, that's what I try to help people find. Nothing about what I do is teaching something new or novel. It's about helping you to remember all that's already in you, that you got in that living miracle that you call your body and your mind, and just helping you remove these little blocks and obstacles to go, oh my God, like this feels really good. Like I think I can get off the ground now again. It's like, and that's what Life Like Jake is. It's me giving to you what I found that saved me, and trying to share it with you in the same way, in the sense that through this system, I've been creating the man that I always needed in my life and didn't have. And through that same system, I'm trying to give him away to the world.
Well, Jake, I appreciate you. We appreciate you. I want to thank you, man, for your service. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time out today to have this chat with me, man. Your content and what you share has been super inspirational for me on my journey. Keep up the great work, my brother. Where can folks find you now that we've talked about Life Like Jake? Where are your platforms and websites, etc.?
Everywhere is Life Like Jake. LifeLikeJake.com, YouTube's Life Like Jake, Instagram, TikTok, the works is all Life Like Jake.
Jake Thomas, thank you so much, sir, for taking the time out with me today. It's an honor and a privilege to have you on the show. I hope we can connect again soon. Like I said, it's an open invitation, man. If you're coming down here, I got your back. I would love to see you in Bermuda sometime. And likewise, hopefully I can make it out to Texas and give you a visit at some point.
Same to you, James. Anytime you get up here, you got a place to stay, and there will be no shortage of food. I think that goes without saying. But yeah, I got the bug in me now. Let's see where Bermuda's at in the schedule, and I'll make my way down there.
Jake, thanks again. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, James.
And that's a wrap on this episode of Carnivorist Chats. If you've made it this far, I want to say thank you for listening, and also thank you in advance for liking, subscribing, or sharing this episode. Thanks again to Equip Foods, Carnivore Snacks, and the Carnivore Bar. Don't forget to check the link in the show notes to get a discount on their products. Until the next time, be well.